Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the channel and welcome to our match reaction for bottom of the league. St Johnstone 1, Celtic 0. That's right, a shock defeat up at McDiarmid Park this afternoon to the side who are quite comfortably rooted to the bottom of the table, or at least were before today's game. And a result that Brendan Rodgers himself has dubbed as unsurprising. So a lot to unpack, a lot of disappointment and shock with Celtic fans after today's game. A lot to be addressed moving forward. Have we taken the foot off the gas? Undoubtedly so. Like and subscribe, all of that nonsense. It's nice to see you, or should I say it's not so nice to see you. It's never nice to come on here after a defeat, especially when it comes to a side who Celtic should be comfortably beating. And I say that with all due respect to St Johnstone, who played their skin off today to get a result. They needed something, and in fact, going into the game, I said to friends, I said to folk on the bus, I have a feeling that St Johnstone could make life difficult for Celtic today, and dare I say I have a feeling they could get a result today just because of how yesterday went. Yesterday was a day that could effectively have spelled the end for St Johnstone in the Scottish Premiership if they didn't get 3 points this afternoon, or even a point to keep some form of hope alive. And lo and behold, they came out the gates and they managed to get something. It was always going to be a difficult test when you're going up against a team who quite literally are playing for survival. They needed a win today more than Celtic needed a win, but it doesn't excuse Celtic from going out and playing the way that they did this afternoon by losing to the side bottom of the table this afternoon. We should be doing better, and the last time we went up there, the last time I was up there, we beat them 6-0. St Johnstone couldn't lay a finger on us, so the difference, I think, is just insane. Not only from that time we played them back earlier in the season to now, but just these last few months. I should say last few weeks. Since that Bayern Munich game, there is evidently something that has changed in Celtic. And today is the day that I finally turned round and went, right, okay, not good enough, not acceptable, quite frankly. And even Brendan Rodgers himself, not happy, saying it's not acceptable. There's something there that he doesn't like. We'll come on to his comments, but he's the man at the helm, and he's the one that ultimately needs to get the players up for this. And the last few weeks, they haven't been up for much. Now, I was happy with how we played against Hearts last weekend. I thought we looked back to a better version of ourselves, maybe a more familiar version of ourselves that we've seen in the opening portion of the season, the opening August to January portion of the season. But you can't say that version of Celtic is back unless there's the consistency that comes with it, unless there's a back-to-back sort of performance like that. And today they had the chance to go and really kind of, I would say, reinvigorate the support, bring back a lot of momentum into the support that are maybe a bit disheartened from what they're seeing at the minute, and they didn't do that. In fact, the performance was boring, it was stale, it was too side to side, it was too passive from Celtic today, from the first whistle to the last. And even when we were chasing the game, yeah, we created chances, and on another day Celtic could have scored 4 or 5 today, but it's just not good enough. There's too many players who look like passengers, and it's almost as if they've taken their holidays because the league is won. I ultimately believe that this is a Celtic team at the minute that just perform better under pressure, that need pressure to get the optimum ability out of them. And we've seen that at this stage of the season last year when there was a title race. We've seen that in the opening part of this season where they had to get out in front early on. We've seen that in Europe this season. It's almost as if Celtic and this group of players, for some reason, perform much better when there's pressure on the line. We had the chance to go 16 clear today with Rangers dropping points yesterday. We were all laughing at them dropping points at Ibrox against Hibs. We should have followed it up, beating the side that was bottom of the table. And because I think that lack of pressure isn't there, I don't know if that's the only reason to blame. We just didn't do it. And I don't know why it is, but the manager has to breed that work ethic and that motivation through them. And just something's just not clicking right now. And it's frustrating. We've got a big cup semi-final coming up, and if we play like that, St Johnstone will do the same again. They'll get a goal early, they'll park every man behind the bus, and then we'll struggle to pass the ball side to side to walk it into the net. We have to have a plan B. We have to have a motivation, because right now it just seems like a team that is so devoid of motivation. And that's really frustrating when you're considering how on track we were only a few weeks ago to make this One of the best seasons in my living memory, and it still is on track to be that. Look, at the end of the day, we're on track to win a treble. We made mighty fine improvements in Europe. I recognise the difficulty of doing what we've done this year. So they're still on track to do it, but they can't let that momentum just go out the window and all those memories of this season go out the window because we've started slacking towards the end now. That would be reckless. And I think there has just been a case of recklessness in Celtic since that Munich game. Certain players recklessly letting themselves just lose track of what the final vision is, and maybe we have a foot out the door. I don't know, but it's something that needs to be fixed, and Brendan Rodgers has got to have a good look at that, because he is as culpable of the players. It's all very well and good to talk about, players missing chances and misplacing passes and whatever, but Rodgers, it starts with him and it ends with him. The buck ends with Rodgers at the end of the day. And you know me, I back Rodgers to the end of the earth, and I absolutely adore him. And I wouldn't say a bad word about the season that we've had. For goodness sake, we're about to win a treble, and a lot of people need to remember that. But these levels of performances are unacceptable when you consider the level that we're at. And something needs to change alongside that. One, you think about it, we have lost 4 domestic games this year. Rangers at Ibrox, Rangers at Celtic Park, Hibs and now St Johnstone. In the calendar year of 2024, we were unbeaten domestically. So to lose 4 in the opening 4 months, and potentially with more to come the way we're playing, there's big question marks over what's gone wrong. And I was so buzzing about where we were between August and February, right up until that Bayern game, and for it just to disappear, I'm very, very confused. Very confused. But we've got to unpack a lot about today. We've got to talk about the negatives and the very little positives. And I've got ICW commentary duty tonight, so I better hurry up. Brendan Rodgers quite rightly said we were soft in the opening stages of the game, and we were again. And there seems to be a softness around Celtic at the minute, and I don't understand where it suddenly came from. Now, I know that the jury has been out on certain players in the defence, aka Austin Trusty, since he got here. A lot of people aren't big fans of him and are maybe yet to be won over. I was won over, and now I'm starting to turn again. I'm starting to go, I think we need an upgrade, a big upgrade there. But he's not the only player who's innocent, is guilty in this situation. There's people who are sitting there non-innocent. Cameron Carter-Vickers in the first half for me was really poor. He was getting bullied. And this is the guy who I believe who's comfortably the best centre-half I've seen at Celtic in my conscious lifetime. And recently he's just looked like a weaker version of himself. And I thought that was happening again in the opening half an hour of today's game. Just a very, I don't know, just like a shadow of him playing rather than the man himself. I don't think Johnstone was anything special. I think that Schlupp was evidently quite poor today, considering he was hooked at half-time. And then Trusty, he's just so scared to take a risk. Now, I'm willing to give Trusty the benefit of the doubt because it's his first game back in a while. He's been out through injury since the international break, so it's been a few weeks, coming up a couple of months since he's played for Celtic. I'm willing to try and give him the benefit of the doubt, but, it doesn't affect your ability to pass the ball forward. Jota was crying out for the ball in times in that first half, and Trusty was just point blank refusing to give the ball to him. Instead, he'd shift it over to Cameron Carter-Vickers. And that was like the Austin Trusty that first arrived at Celtic, the one that took me a few weeks to really win over him, because he was just so reluctant to play the ball in a positive way. And we were seeing a lot of that from Trusty this afternoon, I thought. But he's not the only one. As I said, I thought Vickers was weak as well, and that allowed St Johnstone to get into the game early. And that is the worst possible thing that could have happened to Celtic this afternoon, was allowing St Johnstone to get the goal as early as they did, because St Johnstone has said, every man behind the ball. We done that side-to-side nonsense. Rodgers calls it changing the point of attack, and it just wasn't working. There was a real lack of creativity in the Celtic team, and I don't believe all of it is down to Rodgers, because there's certain players like Trusty further up the park who were just unwilling to take a risk, and that was more evident as the game went on. The midfield for me as the game went on was poor today. There's a lot of online debates between who was the best or worst of the midfield three. I don't think any of the three of them particularly deserve to take any great credit from today's performance. Rio Hatate was playing with, he's a left footer, so I'll say 2 right feet. The guy could have scored 2 or 3 today. And people will go, oh, well, he was still brilliant at whatever else. And I'm like, well, you've got to take those big chances. If it was a striker, we'd be calling for their heads. And I know he's not a striker, but it doesn't mean you're innocent of missing chances you should be scoring. I love Rio Hatate, and I think he was probably the best out of the three. Arguably, I thought he was one of the better players in the park. That's how poor we were. But I still think that those chances that he missed were criminal. But Engels and McGregor, I mean, McGregor was... It's a weird one for McGregor because he was just doing the same that he usually does. But Engels was poor, he was slow. I thought Hatate was slow as well. We were just really devoid of any creativity in that middle part of the middle part of the team. And then when you move into the front three, Nicholas Kuhn today, hooked at half-time, not for the first time recently. He was beyond dreadful, and it's really frustrating because Nicholas Kuhn last week, I vouched for him. I put my fucking neck out there for him and said, that's the type of performance that should remind people that Nicholas Kuhn is still a great player, and we shouldn't be, saying this or that about him just because he's been off it for a few weeks. And then he drops a stinker like that today. The boy was rotten. It was absolutely terrible. And I would say I can't remember him touching the ball, but he did, and he kept running out the bloody park. So it's really, really frustrating. We really need to figure out what's going wrong. In that transition phase of our game, taking the ball from the back line to the front three, it needs to be quicker. It needs to be smoother. It needs to be just fluid, and there's no fluidity in what we're doing. It's walk the ball to the halfway line very slowly, may I add, because that's one of the big criticisms I had today, was how long it was taking us to walk the ball out from the back. We need to get the ball up there quicker, and we need to get more creative with our options. And this is what I was touching on just a few moments ago when I said, it wasn't just the defenders who were guilty of it. As the game went on, especially towards the end, players were cowardly. And this goes out for everybody. This isn't aimed at any specific player. It's not aimed at Trusty. It's not aimed at Kuhn. It's not aimed at Hatate. It's not aimed at... Players were cowardly, and they were scared to be the guy that lost the ball. And ultimately, having that fear is more costly than giving the ball away briefly. Be faster, be more creative, take a risk, and try and make something, rather than getting the ball up that area of the field that might be a decent part to get the ball to, and then just sending it backwards because you're too feared to send the ball in, or you're too feared to maybe go for the slightly riskier pass. I get what we're trying to do. I understand that, but it's just not going to work when you're 1-0 down to a team playing part of the bus football in the 88th minute. Don't be scared to lose the ball. If you're the player that loses the ball, yes, the fans are going to groan, they're going to moan, but if you're the one that gets the ball through and you score something from it, you're going to be thanked for it. And that was, we've seen it. Adam Ida came on. I thought Ida actually did make a great difference to the game today. Not anything significant because we still lost, but there was the one that he sends over for Forrest, which Forrest has to score, and it comes from him just looking up and getting the ball across. Not many players are doing things like that in games like this, and I don't know if there's just a nervousness or a real just reluctance to do it, but it's frustrating. It's really, really frustrating, and we need to get that drilled out of our game. So Brendan Rodgers had a few choice things to say about the performance today, which are going to be under heavy discussion from the Celtic support, I'd imagine, offline and online. He said it was a game that a result he wasn't overly surprised with. He also said, look, it's something for me to look into the summer. There's a comfort there I don't like. And a lot of people might put this down to him refusing to take accountability for his mistakes. But I still think if you read through his entire his words, his entire press conferences, and you look at everything, you need to expand on those lines that will be front and centre. You need to look at everything he's saying, and he's not wrong, but he is to change that, because I understand why people go, well, he's not taking accountability. He is, but he's just also making the point clear that there is some people here who are on holiday, and the fans are saying the same thing. We're all saying the same thing. We understand that there's players here who are just coasting to the end of the season, and they shouldn't be doing that. But he needs to change that. And ultimately, let me put it this way, you know me, I'm Rodgers fan number one, right? I am. But 9 points since the turn of that Munich game, it's the kind of form that has seen managers in really bad situations and with worse things said, and people will already start saying, I'm seeing people online saying, oh, Rodgers out, which I think is ridiculous. absolutely ridiculous. But the form that we're in is the kind of form that has seen managers in this country lose their job. So we need to turn this around. We need to bring the positivity back between now and the end of the season. We could have won the league next week. We can't do that now. We're obviously going to win the league, but we need to win that Scottish Cup. And between now and the end of the season, we need to go to Ibrox. We need to go to all these places, and we need to win. And we need to give the fans something to be excited about going into next season. And he's not wrong. We do need to improve in the summer. We need an injection of life. But it's just, it needs to be positive from now until then. Are people will turn more frequently? It's the nature of the beast in Glasgow. And sometimes it might be over the top, but that's just what it is. And I do believe we will turn it round. Right, I believe it's one of those match reactions where it's more ranting than making sense, so I apologise for that. We will be back in the channel tomorrow to expand on everything in a more analytical way, or a more, let's just say, sensible way. I have been in a bit of a rush because I'm actually already 5 minutes late for call time at the asylum, so that's not good, and I've still got to edit and upload, so I'm going to be about an hour late by the looks of things. If you have enjoyed, please make sure that like and subscribe. It's a bad day at the office, and that's becoming too frequent a phrase at Celtic these last couple months, so let's change that, Brendan. Right, I'll see you all next time.